Hey everyone, in this video I'll be going through all the best matchups to make next for every fighter on UFC 300, starting with Cody Garbrandt. I think Cody needs the momentum back and I want to see him fight in more of a striking oriented matchup. I think the best person to give him to do that at this point in time is Raoni Barcelos. I think it's an exciting matchup on the feet, and I mean Barcelos is already coming off a win against Xiaonan in February. And I mean, Garbrandt didn't take that much damage against Figueiredo. I think overall in this fight, I think it'd be a good way for Garbrandt to regain momentum, or for Barcelos to move up in the ranking, move up to potentially get to that ranking position. With both of them not taking too much damage in either of their fights, I mean, I think it would be best for a matchup in mid-July for a fight night. Moving up the card, Deiveson Figueiredo. I think you give Deiveson Figueiredo Henry Cejudo. I mean, timelines match up. Figueiredo's got the KO power. Cejudo's got the wrestling. A good clash of styles, and especially it's a matchup that we never got at flyweight. I think it would be a missed opportunity not to make this fight. I mean, both are around the same age. Both of them veterans. I mean, both of them just so successful in the UFC. I think it'll just be a good matchup to allow Figueiredo to enter the top 5 in bantamweight, and then also I think it gives Cejudo further options at the top. I mean, Cejudo was on UFC 299 and Figueiredo is on UFC 300, so I think give him UFC 304 in England. And moving up the card, Jim Miller. I think you give Jim Miller Michael Johnson. I think Michael may have a fight in between. I mean, obviously Jim Miller took a lot of damage against Bobby Green, but I think that the matchup's exciting regardless. I mean, both of them are big names. Both of them have KO power, and I mean it's incentive for Michael Johnson as well. I mean, if he fights someone in between, wins, and then beats Jim Miller, he could honestly be looking at a top 15 return. And I mean, ultimately, on the flip side of the coin, I think it'd be a good send off for Jim. I mean, win or lose. I mean, he's a legend of the game. But I mean, if he wins, I mean, and especially with their stylistic matchup, if he wins by KO, I think that'd be such a good send off. Miller needs about 5 or 6 months off though. I mean, he took a lot of damage in that fight with Bobby Green, and I think later in the year, around November, would be good. And moving up the card, we have Bobby Green. I mean, clear as day from that post-fight speech that he gave, just give him Paddy. I mean, great performance against Jim Miller. The fight with Paddy would have heaps of trash talk, get a lot of eyes onto him, and I think it'd be a good test for Paddy on the feet, but not only on the feet, be a clash of styles anyway, but I mean, it's going to be a test mainly to see if Paddy can actually break into the rankings. Clear as day, easy. Put it July, Manchester, UFC 304 if that comes out. Moving up the card, Marina Rodriguez. Honestly, I think in terms of the way the strawweight division's looking and who Marina Rodriguez has beaten already, she's beaten Mackenzie Dern, Yan Xiaonan, Amanda Ribas. I mean, I think you just have to give her Lupi Godinez. I know Lupi Godinez has just lost, but I think in terms of like fanfare, I think you got to give it to Lupi and Marina in terms of their striking capabilities. I think it's going to be a good matchup of boxing versus kickboxing / Muay Thai, and it'll just be interesting to see who actually gets the better in that striking scenario. I think you probably make it for a fight night in August as well. Moving up the card, Jessica Andrade. I think you got to give her Virna Jandiroba. I mean, Virna has taken out both Lupi Godinez and Marina Rodriguez now. She has got a lot of momentum, and Jessica Andrade has just beat Marina Rodriguez. I think you make this fight a title eliminator. It's going to be an uphill battle for Jessica Andrade. She does have the KO power, but I mean, Verna's got the grappling advantage over not just Andrade, probably most, if not the whole entire division, bar maybe Tatiana Suarez and Zhang Weili. But I think that it'll make for a very interesting matchup in that sense. I mean, Virna flicks the jab very well as well, and I mean that's going to be tricky for Jessica Andrade's reach. As we saw in the Marina fight, Andrade has got that KO capability. I mean, she almost took Marina out in the second round. So I think it's a good opportunity for both of them, and I think you just have it as a title eliminator, and whoever wins that, just line them up for the title fight afterwards. I think you probably put this fight around July, put it as a fight night, a main event, or possibly co-main event. All right, moving up the card, we have Jalin Turner. I think you give Jalin RDA. Both of them are pretty consistently similar in terms of their recent form. You look at, both of them are coming off losses. I mean, they're around similar timeline. RDA is coming off a loss against Gamrot. Jalen's coming off the loss against Moicano. Obviously, Jalin got finished. RDA lost by decision, but RDA still took a bit of damage in that fight anyway. So I think it'd be good to look at this fight around end of August, early September. Moving up the card, Renato Moicano got it done against Jalin Turner. By ground and pound finish. Taking the back, full mount, amazing, incredible. I think a win like that gives Renato options. And I think, this has been brewing for a couple months now. Give him Dan Hooker. Renato called him out for a June comeback. But, obviously, it's going to be delayed because Moicano, with fighting recently, he did well against Jalin Turner, but he did take some damage. He did get dropped. But I think the fight with Dan Hooker, which Dan Hooker has agreed to.
The smoke. I'm like, son, I've dedicated my life to the smoke. I said, of course we can fight. We can fight in June. Moicano, me and you can get it down in June. How about that, brother?
I think this fight will make a brutal fight, whether it goes to the ground, whether it's on the feet, and I think you book it late July. Right, moving up the card, Sodiq Yusuff. I think this is a unique opportunity. I think you make Sodiq Yusuff versus Youssef Zalal. I think this fight enhances the African market. You got Sodiq as a Nigerian, you've got Yusuff as a Moroccan. If they're making this African card later in the year, like the UFC has been stating, make this fight. It covers a decent distance, a decent amount of what the UFC has from Africa. I think you put this fight on the card. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends in a finish. Salal's on a 4-fight win streak. He's got the momentum there. And I think after Sodiq losing in round 1 to Lopes, he's got something to prove. Yeah, if not around August, obviously it's going to have to probably be late August, if not even a bit later. Sodiq did get, he got KO'd pretty badly. So I think, yeah, if not August, maybe a bit later, put it on that Africa card. Moving up the card, Diego Lopes. I think Diego Lopes, obviously, coming off an amazing win against Sodiq Yusuff. He's broken into the rankings now. He needs someone to test him, not only just in terms of experience, but to test how good his finishing capability is. And I think there isn't really anyone better in terms of that than Dan Ige at the moment. I think when it comes to Dan Ige, obviously coming off a very impressive win against Andre Fili, but one of the biggest points to it, Dan Ige has never been finished. He has never been finished in his career. And I think that from what we've seen of Diego Lopes, it's like an unstoppable force going against an immovable object. I think it would be an amazing fight to see. And I think, honestly, you pop that on UFC 306 at the Sphere. All right, moving up the card, we have Holm. Holly's getting to the end of her career. She's in that twilight stage, so I don't think there is a better time than to give her the Miesha Tate rematch. I think you give her this rematch, and then realistically, win or lose, even if she wins, like fighters like Kayla Harrison. With Kayla Harrison fighting, the potential return of Amanda Nunes, I just don't think she has it at the top anymore. So I think that the Miesha Tate rematch for that retirement, regardless win or lose, would be an amazing send-off, especially if she wins. If she wins, gets the revenge from her title loss when she got submitted in the 5th round against Miesha, I think that would be amazing. Obviously, there's the 4-month fight difference. Miesha's fought 4 months before Holly did at UFC 300, but in the fight against Kayla Harrison, Holly didn't actually take a lot of damage. I mean, it was a very controlled fight. Obviously, got finished with a submission. So I think it can be a quicker turnaround than people might think. I reckon we probably look around at August for a fight night. Moving up the card, Kayla Harrison. Obviously, great signing, really rejuvenating that bantamweight division. Now, obviously, the UFC is going to want to fast track her through the division. They want, Dana wants Amanda Nunes back. I mean, he wants that narrative there. He wants Kayla versus Amanda Nunes. But I think before we get Kayla to a title fight, I think we get Juliana Pena versus Raquel Pennington for that title. And from that, I see Juliana Pena winning that title fight. And I think that's just the matchup to make, in all honesty. I feel like there'd be a lot of trash talk between the two. Both of them are quite vocal. We obviously saw that with Pena throughout the whole entire Amanda Nunes fight saga. I think it would make for just a lot of good action for the bantamweight division. I think it spices it up, not only because of the fight, but I mean, just in terms of just giving a bit of drama to that division that it needs, just giving it a bit of like a Conor McGregor effect, giving it some trash talk. I think it needs more emotion in there, and I think that's the fight to do it. I think, honestly, Kayla Harrison took no damage, and depending if we do get the Raquel versus Pena fight, if we don't get a Raquel versus Pena and it goes straight to Raquel, I think UFC 303, International Fight Week, on that Conor McGregor card somewhere, maybe co-main, maybe fight before that, possibly if we get maybe Alex Pereira on that fight card. I think that if we get Raquel versus Pena and then Kayla's forced to wait, I think we possibly look around a UFC maybe 307 fight card for that. Now, moving up the card, Calvin Kattar. I think that Calvin should take the winner of Lerone Murphy versus Edson Barboza, which I do think Lerone Murphy will win that. I don't think, when it comes to that fight, Lerone just won't be ready for the Manchester fight in July, or the England fight in July. But I think ultimately it'd be good to see Calvin get that opportunity to strike again, especially coming off that 1.5 year layoff and having to go in there and fight Aljo, which Aljo was just completely dominant in the wrestling department. I think it would be good for Calvin to get back into the game with a good striking matchup. I think we put that on a fight night late August, early September. Moving up the card, Aljamain Sterling. I think when it comes to Aljo, I think we need a good test in terms of the striking capability for him at that weight class. Obviously, ragdolled Calvin Kattar. I think we need someone that is very versatile on the feet to give Aljo a good test and to hesitate on those takedown attempts. Best person to do that, and how the timelines match up, Jiri Rodriguez. Very, very big clash of styles. I think it's good because it's a fight for second chances. Yair gets a second chance against a ground specialist, and it gives Aljo a second chance against a dangerous striker. I reckon you make it a fight night headliner around mid-August. Moving on up the card, Aleksandar Rakic. I think when it comes to Rakic, he needs a momentum fight. Coming back from obviously that huge layoff and then losing to Jiri. He did take a fair bit of damage against Jiri. Didn't get knocked out cold, but I think you give him Johnny Walker. I think this fight's an exciting fight. Two of the largest heavyweights we've got. Obviously a crucial momentum swing fight, and I think you can make that a UFC Fight Night headliner somewhere, I think in July. Moving on up the card, Jiri Prochazka. I think it's pretty plain and simple. Give him the Jamal Hill fight. Jamal has already called him out after the UFC 300 event. Obviously, they were originally supposed to fight for the title. Both of them got injured. Jiri with his shoulder, Jamal with his Achilles. And I think it would just be a good fight for them to really see who is really at that pinnacle of that division behind Alex Pereira. And again, it's similar to the Alex Pereira fight. Between the two of them, it's another light heavyweight finisher. That's a fight would be surprised to see go past the third round as well. And I think you put it on a main card slot somewhere, maybe around September, October, possibly on the 307 card. Moving up the card, Cody Brundage. I think we make this one quick. Eliasgab Khizriev. I think give him the undefeated up-and-comer. I mean, it gives Cody an opportunity to prove himself, see what Khizriev's made of. I mean, he's another Dagestani guy that's coming through the ranks. Just see if he can just pump through, because I think, being an undefeated Dagestani, he's probably going to start a bit of a hype train, and it'd be interesting to see if Cody can do anything about it. But aside from that, Cody's going to need a win soon, otherwise he's going to get cut. I reckon put that somewhere on a fight night in July. He didn't take too much damage, so I wouldn't blame for it being around July. Moving up the card, Bo Nickal. I think with Bo, we do need a test, and I don't think there's anything better than a bit of a changing of the guard test. And I think you give him Chris Weidman. I think it would just be a very good test for Bo in terms of all MMA disciplines. I mean, obviously Bo's a decorated wrestler. Chris Weidman, same with him, completely decorated wrestler. Has shown, throughout his reign as a champion, and when he went undefeated all the way throughout up until Luke Rockhold, showed a very versatile game from pretty much almost all disciplines. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Bo, as a young up-and-comer, goes against someone that is as old as Chris Weidman, but is as well-rounded as Chris Weidman. And it'll be very interesting to see how it actually goes in that wrestling department. I think you either make this fight for the Sphere, maybe around like a feature prelim, maybe a little bit earlier, or possibly the 305 card in Perth in Australia. Bo did hint at it after the media day after his fight. He did hint at possibly wanting to fight at UFC 305 in Perth. Moving on up the card, Charles Oliveira. Honestly, Charles is in a very tricky situation at the moment. Again, it's very similar to Marina Rodriguez in the fact that he's beaten a lot of the top fighters that are already in his division, but then he's having those kind of one-off losses, so it's hard to match him up with specific fighters. But I think since the win at UFC 299, you got to give him Mateusz Gamrot. Amazing ground game battle. Be interesting to see how Mateusz's scrambles work against Charles's offensive grappling and his submission threats, obviously. So it'd be interesting to see if Mateusz does get that win. He'll be there in that title shot line. He would almost borderline be able to wait for it or possibly get a title eliminator fight from that. I think it'd be really interesting to see Arman and Mateusz Gamrot get that fight again to see what would happen in a rematch. It was very close, very controversial fight in their first one. Obviously, that fight's going to have to wait. Arman's next in line for the title for sure after Dustin Poirier. And Charles just he needs a win. He needs a win at the moment. It's just extremely tricky as to what's going on. Even when he gets the win, it's still going to be tricky in terms of matching him up. But I think regardless, if Charles doesn't have this fight, he's going to have a rematch somewhere. He's either going to have to rematch Gaethje, he's going to have to rematch Poirier possibly. It's very tricky for him. I think this would be a very good matchup for UFC 306 at the Sphere as well. Moving on up the card, Arman Tsarukyan. Simple. Winner of Islam and Dustin. Which I think pretty confidently will be Islam. I think Islam will get it done in that matchup. And similar to the Mateusz matchup with Arman, even more so, a lot of people are wanting to see this rematch from when Arman was 23 years old and being able to grapple to that extent with Islam. It's going to be very interesting to see what it will be like in the rematch there. I think it's pretty clear as day. With Poirier fighting Islam will take a little bit of time off. And then, Arman went 3 rounds with Charles. I think you make this for around UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. Perfect for Islam. I don't see why not. Now, moving up the card, Justin Gaethje. Rough one for Justin, definitely. It's going to be hard. He's in another tricky situation as well. Obviously, I think when it comes to Justin making it a bit easier than Charles, is that Justin has these just amazingly memorable matchups. And I think no matter what happens in the matchup that will happen on International Fight Week, give him Michael Chandler. I think you give him Michael Chandler again, give him that second fight. I think it's just whether he wins or loses against Conor McGregor. The fight's perfect for the fans. I mean, Chandler and Gaethje are very pro for the fans, and I think they would just put on an absolute another worldie. But I think if they do have the rematch, I think someone's definitely getting finished this time. But I mean, with either of them winning, it's going to be a strong way to regain momentum. Gaethje's obviously going to need a lot of time off from that KO loss, and there's borderline no doubt that Chandler's going to sustain damage against Conor McGregor at International Fight Week as well. So I probably see this happening on the final fight card of the year, possibly. Yeah, so I mean around December, possibly. Yeah, UFC 3. I'd probably say that would be UFC 309, and I'd put that as the co-main event. Speaking of UFC 309, Max Holloway. I think you give Max Holloway Conor McGregor. Possibly the highest grossing fight that there could be made in the UFC at this point in time. I mean, there's a bit of a choke on the featherweight division when it comes to Ilia Topuria because there's Volkanovski there as well. Volk's very deserving of the rematch. Obviously, it could go either way. It could go to Max. It could go to Volk. There's not a wrong decision there. But I think if Max has the opportunity as the BMF and Conor McGregor wins against Michael Chandler, make that fight. If you are the UFC, make that fight as soon as possible. I mean, there's also rematch questions in there as well. After Conor McGregor beat Holloway, I mean, this definitely could headline UFC 309 in December. I think if Conor does get this done, he'll get a title fight at whichever division he really realistically wants, which I think narrative-wise it'll be against Islam, if Islam obviously doesn't get beaten up until that point against Dustin or Arman. And then I think realistically, if Conor loses the fight against Holloway, I think he retires. Moving on up the card, Xiaonan. Give her Amanda Lemos. I mean, it makes complete sense. It's going to make for an exciting fight for both of them. I mean, they both have KO power, some of the best KO power in the division. And I mean, we saw the power that Xiaonan had over Weili on the feet. Her versus Amanda Lemos, I mean, I feel like that's just a recipe for someone getting knocked out. And I think it's just going to be, it would just make a very good fight for the strawweight division. I think you put that on UFC Fight Night in China, if that occurs, maybe around September. Obviously, the UFC's been circulating around China a fair bit, with Weili obviously being champion again. You've got Song coming up as well. I think that would be a very good opportunity to put that fight on the card. We see that there's a limited number of Chinese fighters, but I mean, if you're giving one of them a fight where we're almost potentially guaranteed a KO or at least knockdowns, I mean, make it happen. Next up the card, Zhang Weili needs to be Tatiana Suarez. And I think this is the perfect opportunity, just what we were going off before, to headline the UFC Fight Night China card. Get Song Yadong on it, get Song Kanan on it, get Yang Xiaonan on it. I think it's just a perfect layup for re-entering China for the UFC. And I mean, there's a lot of hype on Tatiana as well. I mean, she's undefeated, and even more so in a stylistic standpoint. I mean, Weili's wrestling against Yan Xiaonan, even against Carla Esparza. I mean, you put Weili's consistent wrestling that she's got at the moment against probably the best wrestler in the strawweight division, probably the best that the strawweight division's ever seen, in Tatiana Suarez, and I think that it'll make for a great matchup, and it could easily just be the headliner of that card. Yeah, and as I said, I think that would, if they're going to do it, maybe in September, possibly October. And lastly, Alex Pereira. Now, obviously, Alex is interested in the heavyweight belt, but the heavyweight division is a mess at the moment, and I'll be releasing a video on that later on, but I think it has to be Magomed Ankalaev at this point. I think he's the biggest test in the division. Both of them had close matchups against Jan Blachowicz as well, so they've had pretty consistent performances and just their time in the light heavyweight division, in the sense of, you know, they've gotten finishes or they've been close with the same opponent. It would definitely make for a fascinating matchup, in the sense of, I think Ankalaev is the most skilled on the feet behind Alex Pereira, but Ankalaev, I think, obviously it's not high overall in the light heavyweight division, but I think Ankalaev has the best chance of utilizing a ground game against Alex Pereira. And I mean, Ankalaev did come out before about saying, I won't take this to the ground, but honestly, after seeing that Jamal Hill knockout, just take it to the ground. When it comes to that ground game, it'll be super interesting to see if Alex Pereira's new black belt he got at UFC 300 can actually put in any work. That'll definitely be a fascinating sight to see. I know there's been a lot of controversial points about certain black belts being giving out in MMA. So that'll definitely be interesting to see how that comes to fruition and see what result we get from that. But I mean, if you're Alex Pereira, you just need to leg kick the hell out of Ankalaev. I mean, we've seen Ankalaev, especially against Jan Blachowicz, tear his leg apart. His lead leg, he puts a lot of weight on it, drives through with his punches, kind of similar to the way Jamal Hill does it. But I mean, yeah, ultimately it'll make for a very interesting matchup, and it'll make for a good title fight. I think there's a possibility that they could actually co-main event at International Fight Week under Chandler and McGregor. I mean, we have seen it in the sense of Pereira's been pretty notable for not having much time in between his fights to take off. I mean, he's been a pretty active fighter. We saw that between his KO loss from Israel Adesanya to his fight with Jan Blachowicz. So it'll be fascinating to see if that fight can actually come to fruition at that time. And more to that point, Pereira pretty much took no damage in the fight against Jamal Hill. A couple leg kicks, maybe a body shot. I mean, realistically, nothing. And Ankalaev's been waiting since January. I mean, he's been waiting ever since he KO'd Johnny Walker, which he took no damage in that fight either. So it'll be interesting to see if that can actually come to fruition. But I mean, if the talks aren't finalized soon, then I think it would definitely be on the UFC 308 card in Abu Dhabi, which Magomed Ankalaev is already reaching for. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe, and check out the UFC 300 recap video if you haven't already for more analysis on this card.